Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone, we are still in Surah Al Nisa, and I think we're going to be for a very long time, right? So, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. This is where we left off at. Now, one thing I want you to notice, let's actually look at this. So, when you see these ayat right here, وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَ آتُوا النِّسَاءَ, all right? إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا وآتوا النساء ولا تؤتوا السفهاء وابتلوا اليتامى. You could see that the khitab, or the way that the verbs are actually directed, in the words are actually directed more at the leaders. So this is not for one particular person, but this is actually for the community. And this is extremely important to mention, because when we want to talk about, well, who takes the leadership and who takes the responsibility? So right here, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. So the question is, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ. If it is related to women, then we would then see that the way the verb is directed would be for the women. But this verb, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, آتُوا. So scholars had differences of opinions on whether this verb is directed at men or whether this verb is directed at the husbands, or whether this verb is directed at the awliya. So what does that mean? If we are to say and give women their right of mahr as a religious obligation, so what is the other part of religious obligation? The other part, if it's not a religious obligation, then it's a court order. It's a court order. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to emphasize that mahr is not a court order, but is actually a religious obligation. And here, آتوا النساء, if it's for the men in general, that would actually mean it's putting the men in responsibility. What does it mean, the men in responsibility? That would mean that it is considering the men to be in authority. Okay? Now, what does that mean? The women don't have the right of authority? Well, remember, the ayah is actually giving the men the order of being in place of authority and giving women the right over mahr. Hand it to her. So it's not in any way being a misogynist. On the other hand, it's actually saying you're going to have to surrender and give her the part where it's a religious duty to give her the mahr. The other part of this is that some scholars, they said, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, it is directed at the fathers. Why? How did they come up with that? So they came up with that because there were two common things that was a common practice during Jahiliyyah. The first one was the awliya, or the wali, would take the daughter's mahr, wa alaikum salam, the daughter's mahr as a price for her. So what would he do? When the man pays the mahr, the father would take the mahr and consider that belongs to him. All right? That belongs to him. Why? He would claim that, well, I've actually put in a lot of investment to raise the girl. Thank you for paying part of what I had invested in. And he would take the money. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, give the women their right for dowry. In other words, dads, it's not for you to keep. That's hers. Okay? The other thing, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, is directed, yes, at the fathers. And the reason for that was because there was a common marriage called the shighar. What is that? A shighar was a type of marriage that the man, so there would be one man, let's say, let's get them names, okay? There's man Aleph. Man Aleph would have a sister, okay? Let's call her B. And man B would have a sister. Let's call her C. Okay, so C would get married to Aleph and B would get married to B. Okay, and what they will do is that they'll say, well, how about this? So I won't pay you mahar and you won't pay me mahar. We'll just basically give each other sisters, and that way we'll be equal. It's a type of trade. You guys understand what I'm saying? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, that this is actually a religious obligation. In other words, so when you were looking at this one, Mr. Aleph, give B her mahar when Ba gives you the mahar. Give it back to her. And Mr. Ba, when Aleph gives you the mahar for his sister C, your sister C, give her mahar and don't take it. All right? And don't take it. So this is called the shigar. So that is where they actually took the verb, or let me say the pronoun here, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ, that it's actually directed at the awliya. The scholars, especially when we're talking about the wali, is the wali supposed to be part of the marriage contract or not? The answer is yes. A common misunderstanding people would have is thinking that the Hanafi madhab had permitted getting married without a wali. That's absolutely wrong and a very big misunderstanding. Where does the misunderstanding come from? And how do we actually look into this? Number one is that the Prophet ﷺ, going and moving forward, just as in this ayah, it was very strict and very clear in where all the verbs, whether we're talking about this ayah, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, or when it talked about فَلَا تَعْضُلُوهُنَّ أَن يَنكِحْنَ أَزْوَاجَهُنَّ, and it was giving the direction at the men, directing the men and telling them, well, give the women such and such, do the women such and such. The women have the right to such and such. It was directing the words at the men. In other words, the wali. Now, the other part is that the Prophet ﷺ said, أيما امرأة نكحت بغير إذن وليها فنكاحها باطل فنكاحها باطل فنكاحها باطل. The hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, any woman. The word أيما in Lugha Arabiya is actually a verb or a word. Sorry, it's a word that is an inclusivity sign. It's an indication for inclusivity to mean al-fadh al-umum. What is al-fadh al-umum? That means any woman, regardless of whether she had a marriage experience before, called thayyib, or whether she never had a marriage experience before, to be called bikr. That both, ayyuma imra'a, any woman, it didn't specify that that woman was thayyib, a divorcee, or a widow, or whether she never had a marriage experience. The hadith was very inclusive to include every single woman. أيما امرأة نكحت بغير إذن وليها. Now, her marriage would be void, 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 as a sign of an emphasis that the wali is part of the marriage contract. What if the wali abused his position and did what is called the adl al-wali? What is adl al-wali? Adl al-wali is if the wali abused his position and wanted to order the girl to either go to her husband or whether not to go to her husband. In other words, he trespassed his level or his place of jurisdiction. So can you open the door, please? I'm starting to get a headache from the amount of pressure in the place. So if the wali is doing more than what he was assigned to do or what he was given the permission or the jurisdiction to do, in that situation, that adl al-wali would actually be restricted by the court order. And when the wali is conducting more than what is reasonable of his jurisdiction, السلطان ولي من لا ولي له. What is a sultan? A sultan, yes, it means the person in leadership. It sounds like a sultan, but this is not talking about a sultan. This is actually talking about anybody that is in a place of leadership. So a place of leadership, the person that is responsible, whether we're talking about a qadi or whether we're talking about maybe a head of an Islamic organization that is qualified to conduct such matters. Now, if the wali has been removed from his level of wilaya to be in that position, or whether if he abused his jurisdiction, then in that situation, the qadi would take over and the qadi would act as the wali. Got it? Number 3, for the madhab Hanafi, many would think that the madhab Hanafi considered that the women can actually get married without the wali. Not quite accurate. The madhab Hanafi, they actually regarded that it is, they said, موقوف على إجازة الولي. What does that mean? So, موقوف على إجازة الولي, I want you guys to pay attention to this one. So, if we were to have, let's call Ahmed, and we're going to put our pretty girl right here dressed in hijab, and we're going to call her Hiyam. Here's Hiyam, and here's Ahmed. Okay, now let's just assume Ahmed and Hiyam, they wanted to get married. Now, dad said, well, let me look into the qualifications of Ahmed. Islam considers the qualifications of the groom seriously, does not consider the qualifications of the wife seriously. Why? Because if you're the head of the household, we need to put you under lots of scrutiny to make sure that you're capable of preserving the house's deen, the house's security, the house's mental health, the household's chastity and family, and the household's income and money management. So therefore, we're going to basically do lots of research on you. Now, for the majority of the scholars, Shafi'i, Hanbali, and Maliki, they will say we cannot have a marriage contract unless the wali is actually present. Unless the wali is present. Mr. Wali, do you consider this man as qualified and a qualified person to get married to your husband? Yes. So the qadi assumes that the father did his homework in making sure that Ahmad is really qualified. Now, Shafi'i, Hanbali, and Maliki, they actually restricted the qualifications 5 to 7 almost. They considered the money, the deen. They considered even in terms of nasab, they're probably tribe, or even considered the work that they do. A number of different things. That's for the majority. On the other hand, so pay attention to this one. If the Hanbalis or Shafi'is or Malikis, they had these 7 conditions, why are they important? Because for the majority of the scholars, they will consider, okay, well, that's your duty, Mr. Wali. Did you actually consider those issues? That's your homework to do. I'm just going to here, just tell you what to say and document this marriage, and that's all I'm going to do. But if, let's say, Hiyam comes up and says, Dad doesn't want to get me married to Ahmed. The Qadi looks into the situation. Mr. Dad, why don't you want to get Hiyam married to Ahmed? Let's assume Dad said, well, I've got an objection. She's a doctor. And Ahmed is a janitor. She's making 6K and he's barely making 2,800 a month. The majority will say, sorry, we don't actually consider that as a valid objection, Mr. Dad. Sorry, we understand your concern. The Hanafi will say, rightly so. Why? Because the Hanafis, they actually had 14 different qualifications to look into, including the type of job he's doing. Including the type of job. Sana. They'll say, wait a minute. No, we need to see. Oh, you're a doctor, you're making 6K, okay, and you are making how much, mister? 2,800. Well, Mubarak Alik, but I'm sorry, I think her dad has a right to object. But wait a minute, I thought the Hanafi said that a girl doesn't have to have a wali. No. This is a common misunderstanding. It is mawqoof ala ijazat al-wali. What does that mean? That means if let's just assume Hiyam and Ahmed, Hiyam comes, Dad, guess what? I got married. Dad is like, what? What do you mean you got married? Well, yeah, the other day we actually went to the Islamic Center of Minnesota and they said I was 37 years old and I don't need the wali, and they actually got me married. Dad would say, excuse me? No, wait a minute. What did you actually, what did you just do? Oh, I just got married. Yeah, wait a minute. What does he do? He's a janitor. And what are you? You just got your medical degree and your fellowship and your residency, and we paid a lot of money for that. Dad can actually come forward to the head of the Islamic Center and say, objection. This marriage is going to be resolved. Certainly so. The Qadi will say, sorry, Hiyam and Ahmed, I tried you guys, but it didn't work out.
That's Hanafi.
That's Hanafi.
What do you call Shafi'i?
Shafi'i and Hanbali, they will say, sorry, Dad, but your objection is not valid because he's got the good deen. But what if he's got good deen, he's got good akhlaq? We're not going to necessarily consider that. But what if for the Shafi'i and the Hanbali, let's say Dad comes in and he says his objection was not on that. They said the objection, let's say, on the deen. All right, the deen, they would both consider the deen, but not the Hanafi and all the different scholars would consider the deen. Like what? This guy drinks. He smokes weed. He smokes. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're not going to do that marriage. You see it? This is important to keep in mind. This is important to keep in mind because many would actually think that, oh, I can go around. And we're seeing right now a rise in the girls telling me I have a mental issue from my dad and I was abused by my dad, and all these different claims actually coming to the surface in order to somehow isolate the wali. The wali is not for you to actually choose whether he is part of your marriage or not. The wali is the religious obligation, my dear. It's a religious obligation. It's not that, yeah, I want to choose X or Y be my wali. The wali was assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has to have that responsibility. What if the wali abuses his position? The Qadi will look into the situation and say, sorry, Dad, you had abused your position. All the respect, but this is not your right. So the Qadi might actually do them and sign the marriage contract, even though the wali might not like it. Even if the wali may not like it, the qadi, depending on the objection, will actually do or not do the marriage contract. Let's continue right here. So وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم. I want you to look at this one. ولا تؤتوا. So this is آتوا, and you could say آتوا, لا تؤتوا, لا تؤتوا. Do not give السفهاء. Do not give السفهاء. We're going to stop at the word السفهاء in just a bit. أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما. Don't give السفهاء the money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you as a place to stand up with. No, we're going to talk about that قياما because it's a whole important word. قياما, support, provision, sponsor. We'll talk about it. وارزقوهم فيها. Each and every, I think we're going to spend the whole class on just this ayah. So pay attention. وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا. Who are we not supposed to give our money to? Who are السفهاء? Number one, we could see that السفهاء, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did actually mention when we speak about السفهاء that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentioned فإن كان الذي عليه الحق سفيها أو ضعيفا. سفيها أو ضعيفا. So when we look at سفيها أو ضعيفا, what is ضعيفا? ضعيفا basically means a person that's weak. Okay, but what is a سفيه? Listen to this. The first opinion said, well, a safih is basically here, according to the context, it's talking about the women, it's talking about the vulnerable orphans. So is this talking about the orphans? But this is a very general word. العبرة بعموم اللفظ لا بخصوص السبب. A general قاعدة فقهية, a general, consider it like math. In math, we would basically have different laws and rules and formulas to help us conduct the math problems, algebra and all these different things, right? Simple. So same thing in fiqh. In fiqh, we would basically look at the general wording of the text and not necessarily this specification or the context of why that ayah or hadith was revealed. So this ayah is saying, don't give as-sufaha your money, our money, or their money. Who are sufaha? Number one, the first opinion said, well, this is actually talking about al-aytam, the orphans. Mind you, the word is safir is a very condescending word at times and can be a word that is a descriptive word. What is the difference? If I were to call somebody safih, that means they waste money or energy. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even called qawm Lut as-sufaha. They're wasting energy. They're putting it in where it does not belong. Is-sufaha here is also relating to someone that wanders money. All right. Now, when you look at a sufaha, the first one is that the first opinion said, well, a sufaha is actually referring to the aytam, to the orphans. But what's the evidence here? They said, well, all it needs is looking to the context, and this is talking about the orphans, atul yatama amwalahum. So therefore, it basically wanted to explain to you, yes, give the orphans their money, but then it basically said, don't give them your money. Wait a minute. So why would it talk about their money and my money? This is actually talking about their money. Why would it tell me أموالكم, your money. Pay attention, because although this is talking about their money, not your money. It's not that I have $5,000 and I'm like, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me don't give them your money. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the money that I'm keeping for them, their money that I'm keeping for them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me don't give them your money, but I know it's their money. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here explaining to you that there are certain things that, although legally, and the reality is that this is their money, but as a society, when you misplace rights, you will be affected as a society at large. In other words, when you look at the individuals, you cannot disconnect it from the dynamic and the impact it will have on the society at large. Are you guys with me here?
Actions of the individual.
Actions of the individual. So this is talking about, yes, we recognize it's their money, but I'm going to tell you, as a society, even if it's their money, don't give them your money to tell you that this money, if it is abused, misused, that the whole society is going to be at risk. How's that? Pay attention. Pay attention to this one. In Islam, money, effort, and time are very high in their sanctuary. That's why Islam regards energy, money, and time as things that we must consider as very, very crucial things that must be scrutinized. Why? Because if they're misused, then the ummah would be in place of regression. Why would it regress? It would regress whether we're talking about money being abused, or whether we're talking about energy, or whether we're talking about time. So that's why when we're talking about energy, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Qawm Lut and called them sufaha. Because although it's physical energy, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it safih because that energy, you put it in the wrong place. It wasn't supposed to be there. Any type of energy, actions that you're actually putting into something, Islam will tell you, wait a minute, I need to tell you, and we need to scrutinize this energy to make sure that it's being put in the right place, whether we're talking about religious energy and your intention being in it, or whether we're talking about your life, or whether we're talking about your mental health and what you're thinking about and all of that education, or whether we're talking about family or chastity, even like Qawm Lut, or whether we're talking about money. How are you making the money? Where's the money being spent in and at, and so forth. Now, pay attention to this one. Number 2 is the part about time. Why about time? Because remember, al-ayat, wal-asr, wal-fajr, wal-duha, the part about time is very sacred in Islam. So that's why Islam will consider, when it comes to time, what are you spending your time? And that's why the first thing that a person will be held accountable for in the grave, what is that? Number 1, the ilm. 2, their years that they had spent. The money, the years, in other words, the age, the time, their young age. And 3, their money. What did they do with it? What did they use that money for? What did they use the ilm for? Did they get the ilm? If this person, this is really important, because when a sister wants to get married, same thing. If a person in the grave is going to be asked about these things, if a person in the grave is going to be asked about these things, when a guy comes to you, ask him about the same thing. If this person's Islam, they have no knowledge about it. Why are you getting married to this person? I'll change him. He promised to change. He promised to change. Any building, in order to build up, you first have to dig down. And the older they are, the stronger their roots and the stronger that earth became underneath, the older it is. The older it is became too far. In order for you to dig down, what do you have to do? You have to take out all that stuff underneath in order to rebuild all those different grounds in order to go up and build it. Same thing. Ask him about what he's doing in his free time. What is he doing all the time? What is he using his time for? How does he use his time? Same thing when we're talking about money. How do you make the money and how do you spend the money? How do you spend the money? Same thing when you look at here. That's why, by the way, when we talk about Islamic financing and the Islamic economical system, it's totally different from the Western or capital or communist or feudal and whatever economical system there is. Islam's system is completely different. Completely different. In where there are certain things in Islam, when you look at وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ, don't give the sufaha your money, there are certain things that people actually share as a community, and there is no privatization. There are certain things you cannot make as a private thing. This is government owned. Things al-ma' wal-kala'u wal-nar. Water, al-kala', food, and nar, energy. Pay attention to this one. Now, not all food, by the way. What if I grew apples and oranges in my backyard? Can somebody just come over and say, well, hey, we're all sharing this. I'm going to take some of your fruits. No, that's different. When we say al-ma', we're talking about in areas that are considered mawat. What is mawat?
Water systems.
Il-mawat, no. Il-mawat, they're basically public usage. If it's in public usage, that becomes public wealth.
Rivers and lakes.
Rivers, lakes, or even if, let's say, we found, I don't know, oil in a certain place, we're going to say, wait a minute, that oil becomes government property. Let's say we found mines or whatever it is, then that becomes public property if it's in il-mawat. What is il-mawat? Il-mawat is basically a land that is not owned by anybody. You're walking down the street and on the street, there's an apple tree. You can actually eat from that apple tree. It's not personal property. When does it become a personal property? It becomes a personal property if that land was owned by someone and they put the effort to grow the apples or oranges or whatever it is. This becomes a private property. You cannot eat from it until you take the permission. Now, in nar, energy. Now here, the word is actually fire, but this is one opinion is that this is exclusive to fire. The second opinion is that this is not exclusive to fire, but this is including any type of energy such as fire. So what does that mean? Let's say there was a fire in a public area or lights in public area. No one can claim that they own this and it becomes public property. Why am I bringing this up? Just to keep an idea when it comes to understanding wealth, and when we say أموالكم, that the society, although yes, you do have the right to conduct business with your money, but on a condition that you're using the money in the way it is assigned to use it for. ولا تؤتوا السفهاء. The first opinion is that this is actually talking about al-aytam, the orphans. The second opinion is that it's talking about الضعفاء. ضعفاء, anybody that has any disability that disables them from putting money in the right place of usage. Number 3, which is a very ironic one. Listen to this one. Number 3 said it's women. In Nahas, a very important scholar in Law Arabiya, he said that's very ironic and is totally rejected. To call woman or to call women as safih in this ayah, he said this is not relating to women at all. He said this is not relating to women because women can actually hold their own businesses. They can have their own money. They can have their independent thing. If that was the case, then why would it say آتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة? Why would it say to give money to give women their money? If women are not supposed to be taking any money, then why are we giving it to them just an ayah before? All right, why would we give them their money when the ayah says وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة? So that objection was actually, here we go, Nahas says وهذا القول لا يصح. So where did the scholars get that from? Well, that's because in Law Arabiya, women can be called safa'ah. Safa'ah. What is safa'ah? Safa'ah to mean, small-minded. This is a common thing that they would call women. All right. So here the ayah says, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. A very interesting thing. So I'm here going for al-Qurtubi. And he said, well, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he said, مَنْ لَا يَتَفَقَّهْ فَلَا يَتَّجِرْ فِي سُوقِنَا. He said, well, what is sufaha are basically the people that lack ilm, that lack fiqh, the knowledge about Islamic understanding and the Islamic system of transactions. Said this is what it is. Why? Because Umar ibn al-Khattab said, if you did not learn the basics of your Islam, then you cannot conduct business in our market. Simple. The other opinion, they basically said, well, is-safih is any person that we are required to restrict their actions in conducting transactions. Anybody that we would restrict their actions, a type of quarantine, not a quarantine on the body, but this is a quarantine on the person that is misusing their money. What does that mean, to misuse the money? We're going to get to that because the ayah says, التي جعل الله لكم قياما. Let's see what al-Qurtubi or Ibn Khuwaizimindad, just an idea, was a scholar from Baghdad. So Pharisee origin. And by the way, the scholars that are Pharisee origin scholars are very many scholars. In fact, there is a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ said that if ilm, if knowledge was hung way up in the sky like a chandelier, you would see men from Bilad Faris, from the city of Faris, taking that ilm and doing whatever it takes to take that ilm. Where is Bilad Faris? Iran, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, well, not Pakistan, they're not actually Faris, but those are the areas. Kazakhstan, those are Bilad Faris. All right, those are Bilad Faris. In fact, a lot of the scholars like al-Bukhari, Imam Muslim, most of the scholars of hadith are actually from Bilad Faris. Tirmidhi from Bilad, Abu Hanifa was actually Farisi. All right, Farisi is it's a language, right? It's a language, but just to keep in mind. All right, Ibn Khuwaizim dad, he actually said, look at this, very, very smart. He said, in fact, when we restrict a Safis actions from conducting certain transactions, we would actually look into 3 types of situations. 1, the social situation, whether the person is young or whether the person is probably not capable, maybe too old to conduct a transaction, or we would 2, look into their mental capacity. If the person is majnoon or ma'tuh, what is the difference? Majnoon is basically a person that has a mental disorder where they cannot understand how to understand the world around them. They're not capable of understanding.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
So, al-majnoon is 2 kinds. Majnoon mutbiq and majnoon ghayr mutbiq. What is majnoon? Majnoon is somebody with a mental disability. But this mental disability is permanent. That's the first kind.
Okay.
The second kind, wa alaikum salam, is a non-permanent disability, a temporary disability, a temporary mental disability. In where, when we're looking at a permanent disability, in where they're constantly not capable of having the cognitive skills to understand how to make certain additions, whether this is a fair deal, how to buy, how to sell, all of these different things. Now, number 2, as a junoon ghayr mutbiq. This person has a mental disability, but sometimes they're aware of what they're doing. Other times they have to go strong on their medications, and the medications can put them in some type of delirium, some type of hallucination, some type of losing their focus. All right? Number 3 is al-ma'tuh. What is al-ma'tuh? Al-ma'tuh is a person, they can understand a great deal, but when you deal with them, you can recognize that sometimes they're not fully understanding of everything that goes on around them. They have moments where they could seem like they're just absolutely fine. And other moments, you can tell that this person has some form of disability, some form, maybe a development issue, maybe Down syndrome, all right? These people are the second category, which is basically when we were talking about Ibn Khuwaizim and Dad, in where they actually have a mental disability. The third type that would be called a Safi is a person that basically has a moral disability. Listen to this one. What is a moral disability? A moral disability is not talking about a moral disability where they're probably engaging in violence. No. Every moral disability or every immoral behavior, we're going to look at it and we're going to scrutinize and see where it goes wrong. Therefore, if a person has a history of misusing their money, maybe misusing their money in terms of deen, gambling. 2, maybe putting themselves at risk. 3, maybe mentally using drugs, weed, etc. 4, chastity, probably spending money on prostitution or probably spending money in the wrong way. 5, using money in the wrong way and spending it with the wrong management. You've got rent for $2,000 and you bought a car for, who knows, $40,000 and you're only making $1,800.
Bipolar is diagnosed
Diagnosed bipolar. All right. So in that situation, we're going to say this person has a moral issue, or let me call it a behavioral issue, in where who would come in and restrict their actions or restrict their behavior? It would be by a court order. It would be a court order that would basically come in and say, well, wait a minute, we're going to put a wali or a wasi, or we're basically going to be putting someone to help you, like a guardian, to make sure that they're the ones that are helping you make the right decisions. All right? Should we do the 3 again?
Yes.
Somebody, basically their social status or their situation, whether it's a young person, too young to conduct transaction, or too old. Number 2 is that somebody that with a mental disorder and with the different types, matu or majnoon. And number 3 is basically a moral disability in where they're not doing the right thing. Got it?
Yes.
Not doing the right thing. So in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically orders to do what is called al-hajr. What is al-hajr? Al-hajr is not a quarantine, because this is not related to quarantining the person. If you were to Google the word hajr, it will come up as quarantine, but this is not quarantining the person. This is not quarantining the person like we did for COVID. This is basically restricting how they would use the money.
Putting restriction.
Restriction on the amount of money. So there are certain things we would look at, for example, a child. There are certain things in our countries, for example, they might give them 25 cents and it would buy a chocolate candy bar. All right. And the child goes to the store, buys a chocolate candy bar, comes back happy with a chocolate candy bar, and they actually paid for it. Now, what if the child came to a car dealer and decided to buy a $10,000 car? Then in that situation, it's obvious that this child, there's no way his parents had given him $10,000 to go buy a car. So العرف المعروف عرفا كالمشروط شرطا. Listen to this. What is المعروف عرفا? There are certain things that I would have a texture. A text right there. But not everything is actually mentioned in the text. Oftentimes, people would think that culture is a bad thing. No, culture is a reference in Islam. Listen to this. Culture is a reference that is a considerable reference in Islam. In fact, العادة محكمة or محكمة. We'll continue, inshallah, in just a bit.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Guys, was it too juicy?
No, this class is fire.
Looking great.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل من رب السماوات والأرض قل الله قل أفاتخذتم من دونه أولياء لا يملكون لأنفسهم نفعا ولا ضرا قل هل يستوي الأعمى والبصير أم هل تستوي الظلمات والنور أم جعلوا لله شركاء خلقوا كخلقه فتشابه الخلق عليهم قل الله خالق كل شيء هو الواحد القهار أنزل من السماء ماء فسالت أودية بقدرها فاحتمل السيل زبدا رابيا ومما يوقدون عليه في النار ابتغاء حلية أو متاع زبد مثله كذلك يضرب الله الحق والباطل فأما الزبد فيذهب جفاء وأما ما ينفع الناس فيمكث في الأرض كذلك يضرب الله الأمثال للذين استجابوا لربهم الحسنى والذين لم يستجيبوا له لو أن لهم ما في الأرض جميعا ومثله معه لافتدوا به أولئك لهم سوء الحساب ومأواهم جهنم وبئس المهاد. الله أكبر. الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أفمن يعلم أنما أنزل إليك من ربك الحق كمن هو أعمى إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب الذين يوفون بعهد الله ولا ينقضون الميثاق والذين يصلون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويخشون ربهم ويخافون سوء الحساب والذين صبروا ابتغاء وجه ربهم وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناكم سرا وعلانية ويدرؤون بالحسنة السيئة أولئك لهم عقبى الدار جنات عدن يدخلونها فمن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم والملائكة يدخلون عليهم من كل باب سلام عليكم بما صبرتم فنعم عقبى الدار والذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض أولئك لهم اللعنة ولهم سوء الدار. الله أكبر. الله حميدا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
A bad place in the ending. So dar is the house. So dar like a bad house, a bad destination, a bad stay. Should we continue? Yalla, we left off talking about al-'adatu muhakkima or al-'adatu muhakkama. So what does that even mean? So al-'adatu muhakkima or muhakkama, they're both actually meaning really the same thing in English, which is that al-'ada to mean people's culture and the way people would conduct a certain behavior and a certain common culture, common communication between them is actually a reference that we would go back to when the reference itself does not object to it. So during are times, for example, if you were to see a child, maybe a 7-year-old, actually go buy a case of water or buy anything, right away, the security is going to say, where's mom? Or even if we were to say a 9 or a 10 or an 11-year-old, they would say, where's mom? They usually would not do a transaction, right? But during my time, and here in America, I used to go walking almost 2 miles all the way. It was in North Minneapolis, would go to Super Value, buy some stuff for my mom and come back. And I would buy for sometimes almost $70 worth of merchandise. And it was a common thing. I would be 11 or 10 years old and I would basically go buy the stuff and come back. No one would say anything. It was a common thing in America. Right now, it's not common. All right. Now, same thing, even if we were to say a Muslim country, it was, or it is until now, depending on the value of how much you're buying, it would be considered as a permissible transaction if it is within the range that the urf is regarding that this is a considerable and a reasonable value for a child to conduct business in. There was a Sahabi that had some mental disorder. Sahabi, they didn't go in detail, but they said that when he would talk, that his words wouldn't be so clear. His words wouldn't be so clear. You could see that their physical features that were obviously that this person was disabled. The description that they were giving seemed more like a person with Down syndrome. All right, seemed more like a person with Down syndrome. And the Prophet ﷺ approved that this Sahabi would engage in some business. And what we mean by business, probably buying, potatoes or buying something that mom would send them to do. All right. We're not talking about big business. Does that actually contradict وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ? So if we're talking about small transactions, and if it is within the culture that such small transactions are permissible or at least common to do, then that would be permissible. But if we're talking about big transactions, then no, we cannot have somebody majnoon, somebody that is mentally ill, or somebody that has an issue, let's say with their, so let's call it social status, whether it's too young or too old, or whether it's somebody with a moral known issue. Well, for the young or very old, maybe going through Parkinson's or probably dementia, that's pretty much an obvious thing. Okay, that's pretty much an obvious thing. But what the last one is probably the most controversial. What last one? The part about the moral disorder. That's a very controversial one and a very hard one. Because if we're talking about an adult in conducting business, how are we going to necessarily stop them? Or when do we decide to stop them? Number one is that when the ayah says, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ, when you look at the ayah, if we're talking about an adult, it would be considered that their actions in terms of financial actions to be restricted once there is a court order that their action is to be restricted, perhaps of a certain amount of money. So if, for example, we're doing, let's say, a background check and we see, oh, this person has a court order. In other words, the government would actually have certain things. If you were to sell a car, you were to sell a house, you would need their Social Security, or you would need some information to make sure that they are capable of conducting such big amount of money as a transaction. If there is a court order on, let's say, a number of $5,000 and $10,000 and above, then the court order would take place and be in effect from the time that the court order was issued and not before. Are you guys with me here?
Yes.
So some scholars, they actually said, no, it takes effect before the court order. Why? Well, they said because the ayah said, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. If there is a fee, regardless, it's not the court order that makes something effective or not. It's basically this ayah telling me, well, there's sufaha, don't give them the money to conduct business in. But here's the thing. If we're talking about previous transactions that were not known, this would be problematic to void every transaction that was done. But then the court would go into those transactions and decide which one is void and which one is not void. Why? Because if this person was proven to be a safi, to actually allow and make certain transactions as effective, when we would know that these people didn't do the right transactions and it was against their benefit even. This man, he went to buy a Ferrari, $420,000 when he was only making $1,800. So we're going to go to the car dealer and say, sorry, but we need to actually issue a refund for what was paid, and we need to cancel this contract or the lease or whatever it is. You see what I'm saying? So the court would, in that situation, act as the wali or the wasi. Now, here's one thing. The court can give an order, but the person to raise it to the court would actually be the wali or the wasi, or the person that is in responsibility to make sure that things are going in place. Got it? That things are going in place for the benefit of that person and for the benefit of the society as well. What proves that? What if the person was an older person? When does a transaction take in effect? For a person that's an older person, this one's actually tricky because look at this one. For Imam Malik, he basically considered that all the actions that a safi would do would actually take and be in effect unless the qadi stops it. Abu Hanifa, on the other hand, the Hanafis, they said, no, we can't do that. Why? They said, because if we were to assume, look at this one. He considered the age of 25 as the age that we cannot necessarily regard as young anymore. 25, 26. Now, they should be fully mature. This is really strange. How did Abu Hanifa come up with that number? And remember, right now, when does your car insurance start doubling or start becoming less? At age 26, right? At age 26, your auto insurance starts becoming cheaper if you had a good credit and a good history, all right? And we know scientifically, and a lot of research would basically tell us that age 26 is usually the age where a person is mature. Let's see how Abu Hanifa came with the age 25. Abu Hanifa assumed that the youngest age of puberty is 12 for a man. And he said, if a person at age 12 can actually reach puberty, and we were to assume that he had gotten married at age 12, and then let's say he gets his daughter married or his son married at age 13 or 12, that means by the age of 25, he would actually be a grandfather. And he said, I would be shy to restrict a grandfather from conducting business. In other words, man up. I hope by age 25, you're man up already. I hope by then you had become a mature person. If by 25, you're not a mature person, you got a problem. You got a problem. Look at how Abu Hanifa, very smart.
How did he think that?
I have no idea how he thought like that. To be honest, I have no idea. That's a genius. That's a genius. You know, like that would actually look like a grandfather at the time. That's the youngest grandfather that we could actually have at the age of 25. Therefore, we need to consider that by then, we should be looking at somebody that should be mature enough to do the right thing. Very smart. I actually think that's so smart. I would have never thought about it, to be honest. I would have never thought about it. I mean, I would think of the age 25 and 26 just because I read those researches and all those different, all those different studies about being 26 and being 25 and how your brain is fully developed at that age. But that's the only thing. But I would never actually thought about it from that angle. Let's continue. So that's why for Abu Hanifa, he said, we wouldn't restrict his action. We wouldn't actually need a wasi or a wali on a person that is 25 years of age. I hope they mature enough. Imam Malik objected. No, we can't, even if a person is 25, if they're not doing the right thing, it's the community's responsibility to make sure they're doing the right thing. Imam Malik, where did you come up with that? He said, look at the ayah. Look at the ayah. التي جعل الله لكم قياما. Look at the ayah. Don't give the sufaha your money, the money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for you as to what makes you qiyamah. Pay attention to the word qiyamah. What is al-qiyam? Standing. Al-qiyam is standing. But this is not a literal word of standing. So it's not that the money is made for you to stand up, but this is a metaphor to tell us that the money was there. And remember, whether we're talking about money or whether we're talking about energy or whether we're talking about time, it is in order to bring about prosperity, to bring about a civilization, to bring in justice, on all matters. This is what qiyamah means. Give me another word in the Quran that has the same root as qiyamah. What? Well, other than yawm al-qiyamah. Al-qiyamah is an easy one. قوامون. قوامون. What is al-qawam? Al-qawam or al-qiyamah, they actually come from the same root, from the same verb. In other words, it basically acts as the basis to help you stand, to help you prosper, to help you be firm. جعل الله لكم قياما. So what does that mean? How do we stay firm? Number one, in where you use the money to bring about religious prosperity. What does that mean? If you do and engage in some form of, let's say, conducting some things that are haram with your money, whether it's gambling, You're probably 2, putting your security or your family's security in danger. Or number 3, using drugs with your money, buying drugs with your money, or something to harm your mental health. Number 4, something to harm your chastity. Or number 5, you're misusing that, you're making a wrong money management. And in that situation, you didn't understand what the money was to be used for. If you don't know how to use it right, we have to, according to Imam Malik, even if you're 25 and older, as a society, we are going to pay the price for the wrong usage that you're engaging in. Makes sense. Makes sense. I love what Abu Hanifa said, but that makes sense. And especially right now, if we're looking at the society, we're seeing 30-year-old men acting like a teenager, acting like teenagers. In that situation, if we're actually going to let them engage in money and give them the amount of money, then what's going to happen? Then we're going to carry the responsibility of their family. So he's married, he has 5 kids, but then he decides to go gamble with the money. We're not going to let those 5 kids suffer in hunger and probably get an eviction notice, probably end up on the street, probably not have enough clothes, probably not have enough food. Then in that situation, who's going to cover? Yeah, we're going to need to end up giving them government assistance. So if we're going to give them government assistance, why won't we just intervene and say, you know what, we're going to restrict your money usage? Doesn't that make more sense? That way, instead of the government paying the price, we'll make him pay the price and restrict his freedom. If you don't know how to use your freedom right, you don't know how to use the privileges right, we'll intervene as a government and actually take away your rights. Away, you start losing the privileges because you don't know how to use them. Imam Malik's point was this: the Sultan would intervene and say, sorry, you don't know how to use it. We're going to take it away. Now that's the same thing, not only in money, but even in energy. Same thing, even in energy. If the person has some energy, maybe some power, maybe some skill, and they're not using it for the right thing, then the government would intervene and say, sorry, but we cannot allow you to use that. We'll basically restrict it. All right. Even if the society wanted to somehow call it an art. All right. This person is a musician. This person is a dancer. This person is a pole dancer, whatever it is. We'll say, yeah, they will call it art, but we won't call it art. We will call it an effort used in the wrong way. We won't call it art. A great dancer, great music. We were sorry, but no. This effort, if it is not used right, then we have to then restrict it to make sure that it is bringing the society in a form of qiyam. What is al-qiyam? Standing. What is standing? Civilization. What is standing? Prosperity. What is standing? Justice. That's what it means. In other words, when Islam looks at energy, money, or even time, Islam considers that, yes, we all, as a society, have the responsibility to make sure that all these areas are bringing in ja'alallahu lakum qiyama. Yes, it is their money, but we cannot say that, well, this is exclusive to them. This will affect you. This will affect you without you recognizing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ja'ala lakum qiyama, that was supposed to be an energy and an advantage and a privilege that was supposed to bring prosperity in the community. If you don't stop them, it's either going to bring prosperity, qiyam, or a regression downwards. قعود, تثبيط. Remember the ayah in Surah Al-Tawbah. قيل لهم قعودوا مع القاعدين ثبطهم وقيل لهم قعودوا مع القاعدين. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are certain people He didn't want them to be part of the group. Why? Because if they were لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them when during the time of Tabuk, remember the 30,000 of Muslims from Medina, they go to meet the Byzantine Empire, and then 1/3 of the army decided that they, well, basically part of the munafiqeen, and decided to go back to Medina. The rest of the army, they kind of affected their confidence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا. If they were to join you, they were just going to do nothing and increase nothing in you but laziness. They're going to hold you back. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell them? قيل لهم قعدوا مع القاعدين. No, I want you to stay sitting down. With those that are sitting down, don't even go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want to include them, didn't want them to be included, because they were going to regress any progress that the community was doing. And that's the same thing here. What money, energy, time, ilm, what it is supposed to be doing is bringing more success, more justice, more success, and more prosperity in the community. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, جَعَلَ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا. So what should we do? وَارْزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. Does that mean that they don't get to use it at all? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَارْزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. You guys have to give them the amount of money that they need to conduct certain things. وَارْزُقُوهُمْ. Give them the rizq. Give them the amount, the provision that they probably need, maybe food, maybe clothing, rent, certain things, transportation, etc., utilities. You do the job. I gave them the money to cover their utilities. They just spent it on gambling. Well, okay, now that's why I'm putting you as the wali. You use their money to pay their utilities. You use their money to probably buy their groceries. You use their money to pay for their gas, or maybe give them a gift card instead of giving them access to their account. Say, here's your gas, or maybe we could just say, okay, here it is. You're getting a Speedway card just so that you could just use it just for gas. Some people, they just didn't learn how to use their freedom. So then we would have to intervene to limit their freedom that they didn't know how to use. وَارْزُقُوهُمْ فِيهَا. Give them the rizq. وَاكْسُوهُمْ. And give them the kiswa. Al-kiswa is involving whether we're talking about shelter or whether we're talking about clothing. وَاكْسُوهُمْ وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. You're probably boiling by now about a person that's probably misusing their money. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Just say kind words to them. They are safi. Notice when earlier we said it can be a condescending term and it can be a descriptive word, istifahat. Can be a descriptive or a condescending word. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here says وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, it is to more be descriptive than condescending. Because it makes no sense to call somebody a name and use a condescending name and at the same time ask someone to be nice to them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, I'm giving you here a description. Somebody is misusing their money. you intervene, make sure you help them conduct their business right, and don't constantly rebuke their action and probably try to engage in some kind of harsh words because they are sufaha. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, قُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. And this is extremely important because especially when we're talking about people with different types of disorders, let's call it a disorder. Let's call it a disorder. If we are to call it a disorder, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. If this person has autism or probably Down syndrome, or probably, a different type of a disability where you ended up being the caretaker for that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, listen, not because you are the guardian or you have the authority over them, it does not mean you have the right to abuse them. Why? Because yes, it oftentimes happens that when the person's given a restriction over access to their own money, others may see them as weaker, as a place of abuse. That happens often. That when a person is restricted in their authority, and especially if the person in authority is taking that type of leadership, that type of authority over them, that can oftentimes make them more prone to abusing that person, and abusing them usually verbally. And verbal abuse is extremely dangerous. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasized the verbal abuse, because oftentimes it's a lot harder to detect than physical abuse. Physical abuse, simple. Uncover and people will see it. Financial abuse, simple. Bank account, the statement, the qadi will see it. But if we're talking about verbal abuse, prove that this person was saying this and this to you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, to emphasize and underline, do not abuse them verbally or others. But this is not restricted only to verbal abuse. Because when we say وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, it doesn't mean that physical abuse is permissible. But this is in order to say this is very common. So make sure when you talk to them, even if you are in charge, this would include verbal abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, and who knows whatever. And the list goes on and on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Not because you're an authority, not because you're wasi. So is that forever? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح فإن آنستم منهم رشدا فدفعوا إليهم أموالهم ولا تأكلوها إسرافا وبدارا أن يكبروا. So what happened? وابتلوا اليتامى. So are we still talking about a sufaha? Or are we talking about an aitam? Well, it depends on what we said about sufaha. وابتلوا اليتامى, for the yatim, the orphan. There's ibtalu. What is ibtalu? Al-ibtila is supposed to be to expose a person on a challenge. Put a person on a specific challenge. So how do we do ibtila for the yatim? We would conduct some kind of a challenge on the yatim in where it can be وَبِتَلُوا, the words can be directed at the wali or the wasi, or it can be directed at the qadi. Al-qadi is the judge. Il-wali is the person in guardianship. Il-wasi is the person that was given a power of attorney to be the guardian. Got it? Now, so what is ibtalu? You're testing them. How are we going to test them? Are we going to test them by giving them money and see how they would do it? Or we would basically have different witnesses say, well, yeah, we've seen this person engage in such and such transactions, or yeah, they're not actually mature enough. Mature, we talked about maturity, and what is maturity? So the ayah says, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحِ, when they reach the age of marriage. This is not talking about marriage. بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحِ is the first level of maturity, to mean they reach the age of puberty. If they reach the age of puberty, why بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحِ? Reaching the age of puberty in Islam is basically the first level of adulthood. The first level of adulthood. Yet, being an adult physically does not mean that you had become an adult mentally. So the ayah continues, فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. فَإِنْ, and if. The word آنَسْتُم, الآنسة, there's الإنسان. It comes from the same root. الإنسان or أنيسة. What is أنيسة? أنيسة actually means to sense. الإنسان was called الإنسان because they're full of senses. In Arabic, they're not human. In Arabic, insan, to mean a person of senses. A person of senses. A person
Of senses.
senses, your ability to see, your ability to hear, your ability to think, your ability to talk, that's full of senses. So they didn't look at it as a human, but in Arabic, no, looked at it from that you've got senses. You've got these, الإنسان. الإنسان from النسيان, that's النساء. النساء الإنسان من الأنس. الإنسان من الأنس وليس من النسيان. من الأنس. All right. Now here, فإن آنستم. الآنسة, to sense. منهم رشدا. Who's a Rashid? الرشد has two things. There's the verbal part. The verbal part, الرشد, is the ability to be mature mentally. What is maturing mentally? Maturing mentally, making sound decisions that are fit for the circumstances that the person is in.
Can you define Rashidun with the 5 DNME and the
Sure.
to recommend?
So if we actually go back to Surah Al-Hujurat, it's a very important. Surah Al-Hujurat, what does it say in Surah Al-Hujurat? Let's go back to Surah Al-Hujurat and actually take that. What page is this? Hold on. Let's look into it. I think I've done it with you guys with Surah Al-Hujurat.
Yes.
We've done it
Not
in
Hijra,
Surah.
we did it to Surah Imran.
No, we've done it in, yeah, exactly. ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان
We did it.
وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان أولئك هم الراشدون. So this is exactly it. فإن آنستم منهم رشدا, number one, حبب إليكم الإيمان. This person has a loved iman. But here's one thing. That rushd is more of a spiritual rushd. حبب إليكم الإيمان, person that loves the iman. زينه في قلوبكم, beautified it in your hearts, that is faith. كره, and you hated الكفر, disbelief, الفسوق, sin, والعصيان, and even the smallest sin. That's a type of maturity in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that's the true type of maturity. In where the person is capable of seeing the realities of the world around them from the core. Oh,
Okay.
at the core, to the core, that they're capable of seeing. But this rushd, we can't see, wallah, how far did your iman go into your heart? How should I know? Do you hate kufr, fusuq, and asyan? Prove it. Well, that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, not me. We need something practical. This rushd is a different level. This rushd is basically a practical type of rushd, practical type of maturity that I'm going to test you. I'm probably going to give you $3,000, which is amount, a fair amount. I'm going to give you probably $1,500, $3,000, and actually see at a scale of probably 2 months what you're going to do with them. Do you know how to do money management? How are you using the money? Are you considering what Islam says in terms of regulations of money usage? Are you considering your health? Are you considering your mental health? Are you considering your chastity? Are you considering money management and what needs to be conducted? How much money is coming in? How much money is going out? Are you considering money management to make sure you're understanding the needs and the wants? Do you understand? Because I don't want to give you all the $75,000 or $100,000 in your account and give them to you if you can't even be responsible over $3,000. I know it's your money, but I need to make sure that I don't end up being responsible for you and your children, right? I need to make sure. If you don't know how to take care of $3,000 or $7,000, then sorry, I still need to be there to make sure that this $100,000 is spent on you and in the right way. So in that situation, we would basically do al-ibtila. Al-ibtila is a test. It can be the qadi. What if they go into dispute? The man says, well, the truth of the matter is that my wali or the wasi, he doesn't want to give me access to my money, not because I'm immature, but because he wants to restrict me so that he could be the person in charge of me. It can happen. He just wants to be a narcissist. The qadi then will assign someone to be similar to what is called a guardian ad litem. The guardian ad litem will get into the situation and see. We would have people like psychologists, we would have relatives, might even have witnesses, we might actually see a lot of different things about his record, and the judge might actually assign him a certain amount of money to have access to, and then the qadi will decide if there was a dispute on whether he is qualified or not. In other words, it's not the final thing, because at the same time, this is important. So just as the Quran will tell you we might need a wali, it doesn't consider that the wali is going to necessarily be the right person to take care of all the matters. Islam does consider that, yes, it can happen that the wali, whether that was a father or whether that was a brother or whether that was a relative, that they might actually engage in some form of abuse. In that situation, the Qadi will intervene and say, well, let me see, we need to look into this. It can happen and we can see it all the time. So right here, فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا, you sense a rushd in these 5 things. Then فَدْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُم. Then فَدْفَعُوا. الدفع is not to push. This is a metaphor. In Lugha Arabiya, فَدْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ means then give them access to their money. Notice that the word أَمْوَالَهُم here and أَمْوَالَكُمْ here. Why? Because when it said لَا تُؤْتُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ, it was in order to tell you that money, you're in charge of it because it comes back to the society. But here it said أَمْوَالَهُم, it's their money. It doesn't belong to you. Even if you're the wasi,
They are responsible.
if they are in right now in a state of maturity, well, now this is their money. You don't have access and you should not have the right to take it. That's it. Thank you very much for all the care that you had shown, but this is their money. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا. الأكل, when you're eating. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا. Don't gulp it all up. إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا. What is bidara? Bidara to mean that they would take the initiative and they would give themselves the permission to take the money and abuse their need. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't take the money and abuse their needs or even engage in some form in order to somehow claim that you're just trying to do the right thing for them, when in reality, you're actually using the money in order to increase your business. Right? It can happen. I've got 70,000. So I'll use the 70,000 and I'll consider that, well, I'm using it, but I'm actually, it's a debt. I'm keeping it for them, when in reality, I'm actually using it for my business. I'm using it for my business. I need the money for my business. And the child doesn't have the power to oversee, or even this yatim doesn't have the power or even the access to see what I'm doing in reality. Man, I look so evil, don't I? وَمَنْ كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ. And whoever, الغني. Who's الغني? الغني, if you have $4,122 in your account for over a whole year, you're rich. How many people have more than that? You're all fuqara. We'll create a GoFundMe page for all of you. We'll create a GoFundMe page. All right.
You don't have to disclose the financial.
Alhamdulillah, there you go. And kana ghani, there you go. Ghaniyan falyasta'fif. I was actually trying to test you. Okay, falyasta'fif. What is falyasta'fif? If you're rich and you've got the money, then falyasta'fif. Then don't take from their money. Try to, in other words, donate your services and keep their money saved for them. If you want to put the service to help that yatim person, فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ, and don't take from their money. If you're rich, all right, then put your services as a donation. وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا. But if you're poor, فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, then you can deduct. So here, فَلْيَأْكُلْ, it doesn't mean to eat, but this means to deduct. Then you can deduct from their money bil-ma'ruf. Il-ma'ruf has 2 meanings. Il-ma'ruf can mean on good terms. Il-ma'ruf can mean the terms that are known within that society.
But if you have wealth, you have to donate it.
No. Why you have to donate it?
You just said if you are able, use it.
No, we're talking here, these words are actually directed at the caretaker over a yatim.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we're talking about you've got a yatim, you're taking care of them, and this yatim, somehow they inherited $200,000. All right. But you're rich. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, if you're rich, then donate the services, make them like a donation. فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ. Then avoid using their money. But if you are poor, don't use their money on your needs, but use the money for their needs. But it's hard for me to actually deduct. I mean, it's not like, oh, this I'm not sitting in this room. It's only when he's using it by himself. Therefore, let me calculate how much time he used that room for in order to do the energy calculation. No. This is a like estimation. What is the estimate amount of money that that person uses, or at least if we're talking about a household of 5, for example, how much does the county consider that it costs for a person, for every individual or every child from this age to this age to cover up their needs? Then I'm going to look into that and consider that this is what the number is. So we'll look and call the county, and they've got all these numbers, and we'll say, okay, a family of this much. For every individual, this is how much it costs, right? We will basically say, we're going to deduct that amount from their money, the money that they inherited, and this is considering al-ma'ruf. فإذا دفعتم إليهم أموالهم فأشهدوا عليهم. If you give them their money, let there be those witnesses to witness that you did give them the money. That way, they won't claim we didn't get anything. We've got the evidences that I transferred the money to your account. I got the evidence that you basically had become the only person on that account, and that I was removed from the account on such and such date. Got it? Or if it's cash, Mr. Fulan, Mr. Fulane, or Mrs. Fulane, I want you to witness that I gave him these banknotes on this and that day. Sign and sign. Here's your copy. Here's my copy. Thank you very much. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ حَسِيبًا. And Allah Almighty is enough to hold all of you accountable. This is the end of this page. There's actually a lot more. I wanted to say a couple things that I forgot to say, which is, can a woman, when this ayah says, وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ, where is that ayah? Right there. وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمْ. Can the woman become a wasi?
Yeah.
She can? She cannot?
She can.
She can? Can she or not?
Wasi is power of attorney.
Wasi is a power of attorney. She can? So scholars actually had differences of opinions. The majority said that she can be a power of attorney. But other scholars, they said she cannot. So what is your evidence? So the first group, they said, well, Umar ibn al-Khattab had Hafsa be the power of attorney. Therefore, she can. Ata ibn Abi Rabah said, no, she cannot. Why not? They said, well, if she cannot be, he said, if she cannot be the wali, even in marriage, how can I actually put her a wasi to be given a power of attorney to probably get somebody married? In other words, they considered a restricted type of a power of attorney. All right. I'm just giving you those differences of opinions. All right. The majority, they said, no, she can be a power of attorney, because what she's really doing, she's being a power of attorney, but she's just voicing the other person's irada, the other person's will. She's not engaging in the will. She's just voicing the will of someone else, whether that's a wali or whether it's another person. She's just voicing the will. All right. All right. Any questions? I can go on and on, by the way. This is just really quick.
So Surah Al Nisa is fiqh.
Surah Al Nisa is fiqh. How many days have we been doing this right now?
Four. This is the fifth class.
Well, exactly. So we're looking at, it's a lot to talk about in Surah Al Nisa. There's really a lot. It's fiqh. It feels totally different than. It feels totally different. It's practical. It's practical, definitely. It's practical. So, inshallah, we'll end right here. Okay, we'll end right here. Go ahead, my dear.
Regarding the right of mother choosing wife for her son, does she have the right to decide or decline the woman is going?
Fair enough. Does the mother have the right to decline the right to decline the marriage for her son or daughter? Number one is that the son does not need a wali. So whether the father objected or the mother objected, he can still get married. What if she says, I will do a la'na and damn you, boy? We will say, I'm so sorry, mom, but and dad, but you guys are actually expanding your area of jurisdiction.
So the wali is only for the woman.
The wali is only for the woman. Why is there a wali for a woman and not a wali for a guy? Because the consequence for a woman, if the marriage were to go wrong, I'm going to go to that father and say, listen, I want you to support your daughter, stand up like a man. She's going through a hardship, and I want you to be there for her. That's why. So Islam will say, al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. What is al-ghunmu bil-ghurm? Al-ghunmu bil-ghurm is a very important basis in Islam. What does that mean? Al-ghunm is when you get money. Bil-ghurm is when you pay the price. Just as I were to ask the father to pay the price if the marriage were to go wrong, I should also give him the authority and the responsibility to be responsible for the consequence if something were not to go right. Al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. So in that situation, I would say, Dad, I'll hold you responsible if anything goes wrong. So he'll say, well, at least give me the chance to help make the right decision. That's fair. Fine, I'll be responsible. But can you at least give me some space to make sure that this decision is right? That's why al-ghulmu bil-ghulm. Because we're going to hold you responsible. You see what I'm saying? We're going to hold you responsible. So it's not fair to hold the father somehow responsible over the daughter and probably end up, being there to give her support and all of that, but then not giving him the right to make sure that the decision is made right. What if the boy makes the wrong decision? The father is like, too bad for you. It's your responsibility. We will not hold the father responsible for anything. For anything. In fact, look at this ayah. When you see this ayah, وَآتُوا, where is it? وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ. From this area, the scholars had considered that the mother and father are not responsible, especially the father is not responsible. Well, the mother is never responsible for her children's financial needs, but the father, his responsibility ends once they reach the age of puberty. Once you reach the age of puberty, go get a job if you're a boy. If you're a girl, your dad would have to continue paying for you even if you reach the age of puberty, unless two things. Unless you got married, خلاص, your responsibility becomes your husband's duty. Two, if you're financing yourself, you got a job, well, you got a job, spend on yourself if you got a job. Allah Akbar.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So I'm spending on my daughter until she gets married or she can.
Just been okay, خلاص, fine.
On my son as long as he's
All right. If there are any other questions, even from the people online, inshallah, we'll answer you can unmute yourself and participate, inshallah. Go ahead. Raise your voice though. You can even sit over here.
For the boys, when they reach the puberty, to
McDonald's.
yes. I'll kick them out.
You'll kick them out? No, don't kick them out of your home. No.
I got more boys. I got opportunity. Kick them out.
No, don't. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Don't misunderstand me. So when we say you're not responsible for their expenses, okay, there is a very important thing to consider here. Number one is al-urf. Al-urf is very important to consider. So although, yes, reaching the age of puberty is a considerable thing, but al-urf right now, for example, when we're talking about, what if your son reached the age of puberty at 13? Are you going to say, okay, get out and go and get a job, etc.? So, but what I would say, not only al-urf on what they should be doing, but what I would say is teach your children that once you reach the age of puberty, that you are right now considered an adult and you should be capable of taking care of the responsibilities at home like an adult. Because if you're not acting like an adult at home, then you're not going to be able to act like an adult on the street.
Like wash your clothes, make it.
Exactly. Clean up after yourself, clean your room, study, can you hold responsibilities, and so forth. The other thing is that when it comes to moving out of your home, do not move your sons or your daughters outside of your home unless they are married. It's a very big fitna that within our society right now, because I guess the close proximity with the kuffar, that when many times we're putting in and taking in their culture. Do not get your children outside of your home, whether they're your sons or your daughters, outside of your home before getting married. It's not just for girls, but it's also for boys.
What about if they go
Because
for college? Is that okay?
so when we're talking about living on their own, it's a fitna. Living with a group of guys their age is a fitna. But when you're there, becoming the person to still when your responsibility is to mentor them until they're actually free of such fitna. But it's really sad that right now, because of the relationship with the kuffar, that we're seeing many girls and many boys actually going out and moving and living on their own.
Don't leave. Okay, Sister Aysha, until you give an answer. Boys.
Boys too. Okay.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله بالحق ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ومن تاب وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله متابا والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما والذين إذا ذكروا بآيات ربهم لم يخروا عليها صما وعميانا والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما خالدين فيها حسنت مستقرا ومقاما قل ما يعبأ بكم ربي لولا دعاؤكم فقد كذبتم فسوف يكون لزاما. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
No, I don't know who is only people listen. Remember, the people listen here. Back to normal. If you tell for the children, they listen when you come back. The other person, they want you to listen. Some children understand.
Thank you.
No, she tried to. Women are still
Okay.
This is you.
Zoe, she didn't come.
Wanna vacuum with me?
Right.
Maybe they'll have vacuum.
Aysha, how do you do it?
How do you do what?
يقتل نفسه. He said in the ayah.
قتل النفس.
قتل النفس, what is that?
قتل النفس is killing the
قتل النفس.
قتل النفس
Like
is
in
killing
those
yourself.
ayats that he talks about. You remember Bukia you did in Surah Al-Maryam.
Right. So
Man
ولا-
Taba, you did in Surah Al-Maryam. They
let me answer that. ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم.
Before I forget, Morgan's mother passed away.
Yeah, well,
والله لا إله إلا الله. إن شاء الله remind me to give my
Okay,
condolences
inshallah.
and everyone in person.
Tomorrow.
So the ayah ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم, although literally it means do not kill your own selves, but the context of the reason for the revelation of that ayah is not do not commit suicide, although literally it means do not commit suicide. But the context of the ayah was revealed in order to tell them that if you would not conduct in jihad, it is literally like you are killing your own selves by bringing in and making you an easy target for the enemy. That's the context for the ayah and the way that it was revealed. But can we use وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ as also an evidence to prove the impermissibility of suicide? Yes, you can. Got it? All right. Well, inshallah, we'll meet next week. For the people that are online, if you would like to ask any questions, you can unmute yourself. You can unmute yourselves, inshallah, if you want to ask any question. Utandi is here, long time didn't meet. My mom's here too. Everyone's here. All right. So, inshallah, we'll see you all next week, inshallah. And or Wednesday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Wa iyyakum.